The whole story began probably back in the mid-60s. And I was studying with a lady who had amazing amount of wisdom and understanding, Dr. Sherwood, and for 12 years I studied with her, and she's the one that introduced me to vegetarianism and cleansing, and especially fasting. And because of her, I began to experiment with myself and to understand what fasting can do for the human body. And I went about this for many, many years. I had amazing successes in it. And then over the years, I began to get away from other things. I remained being a vegetarian for all my life since 1971. But what happened is that in 1981, I ended up with a severe infection in the gums. And that was caused because of root canals that I had when I was a child. And the root canals became so toxic that I began to have some serious health issues. And I ended up having surgery, and they pulled out this cyst that was in my gums, and the doctor who did the surgery told me that if I hadn't come in, I would have probably been dead in 3 more weeks because it was just on the edge of penetrating into the sinuses. Now, root canal toxicity is extremely toxic. It's more toxic than the venom of a rattlesnake. So it can kill you. And if it gets into the sinuses, then you can die. And there's nothing they can do about it once it gets into all the different cavities. Well, anyway, so everybody thought I was going to feel just fantastic the next day after the surgery, but it didn't happen. Who knows what did happen, but I never recovered from that. And 30 days I was in bed and extremely toxic. Finally, I had to go back to work and make a living, and for almost 2 years, I was so toxic and so sick that I really could not function normally in society. My memory was so bad that I was an embarrassment to myself. And finally, I got so desperate, I decided that I need to do something about it. I didn't know what for sure because I tried everything. All these years I was working on myself, trying to find out what was wrong. And finally, what happened is that somebody recommended a colon cleanse. And I did not have a lot of faith in that. And so skeptically I did this cleanse for 60 days, and it's one that's in almost every health food store on the market. I won't mention it because it really was, based upon what I know now, it really shouldn't be on the shelf. It was not a colon cleanse at all. And after 60 days I threw the rest of it away, declaring myself worse than I was when I started. And so that's what I thought colon cleansing was about. I thought it was a fraud, and I thought it was a sham, and until somebody convinced me to give it another shot. And so this was an herbalist that I knew in Portland, Oregon. And so we got myself on a cleanse and what I call a mini cleanse compared to what we have today. But on the 4th day of that cleanse, it was like a miracle happened to me. And I was reading a book. It was in the evening. And sitting in front of the fireplace, reading this book, I suddenly felt a shift in my abdomen. And I felt horrible. I slumped in the chair, and I thought, my gosh, am I going to die or what? I was really sick. And I just laid there for about, partly on the chair, partly on the floor. I laid there probably for 20 more minutes, and suddenly I had an urge to go to the bathroom. I crawled to the bathroom, got myself up, sat down, and all of a sudden something came out of me like, what was that? And I stood up and I looked and I said, oh my gosh, I'm a goner for sure. I just pooped out my colon. I must be so rotten inside that my colon just let loose and came out. I'm a goner for sure. That was my first thought. My second thought was, wait a minute. That can't be my colon. I'm feeling pretty good. And I was amazed at the rush of energy that came into me. And I examined this piece, who knows how long it was, but it was huge. It took up the whole bowl, practically. And regrettably, I flushed it down the toilet. I should have taken it out and should have had it mounted. This was the most changing event of my entire life. And I flushed it down, I went into the other room, and for the first time in 2 years, I got down and did push-ups. And guess what? I had a whole nother idea of what colon cleansing was about. And I got really excited. And so for the next 3 days, I passed one piece after another piece. I had a piece of paper, I had a ruler, I had my chopstick. I was measuring how much was coming out exactly. I turned into the scientist at that point, and I had to know everything about it. And at the end of the 7-day cleanse that I was on, I had removed 12 feet of this rubber-like rope. It was almost black. It was kind of a blackish green. That's what came out of me for the next, I don't know how many years. It was always blackish green. And so I felt so fantastic. I had not felt that good. I couldn't remember having felt that good. But it was nothing compared to what I would later feel like. And so according to the directions, after 7 days, I stopped the cleanse. And I regret that. I should have stayed on it longer. But I followed the directions, went off of it, waited 7 weeks, did another 7-day cleanse, and I got another 12 feet out. And then I did it again, 7 weeks later, got another 12, maybe 14 feet out. And I had so much energy at that time, I hardly knew what to do with it. I mean, I was amazed at how much energy I had. So after that, after I finished the third cleanse, I was so energized that I was wondering how am I going to deal with this excess energy? Can you imagine? So many people lacking energy. And imagine having so much that you have to determine what to do with it. It's just too much. And so I decided to climb Mount Shasta. I was living in Mount Shasta at the time. Mount Shasta is a 14,162-foot mountain. And so I decided to climb it at noon that day, and I gathered a few things, put some grapes in my backpack, and headed up on the mountain at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I started walking up the mountain. And I was so full of energy, so full of love, so full of joy. I've never known so much joy and so much love in my whole life. And so I had to talk to everybody I met going up the mountain. And I would sit there or stand there and talk to them for 20 minutes at a time, then move on. And pretty soon I'd meet somebody else and talk to them. And then I got excited about climbing the mountain, and I took a shortcut that turned out to be an impossible way of going. I had to hike way, way back down and go a different route. And I got up to the top of the mountain at 7 o'clock in the evening. So it took me 5 hours to get up there, and probably was only hiking for about 3.5 or 4 hours because I had so much energy. And I never lost that energy. And when I came back down off the mountain, I stood on the rocks looking above Helen Lake, or Lake Helen, up there at 10,500 foot level. And I looked out over the Strawberry Valley down below, and I could feel this energy just pulsating in my being. Just zoom, zoom out. What is this? My gosh, what is our potential? And then I took off and I ran all the way to the car, and I was almost gliding in the air. I had got down to the car and I had the same amount of energy by the time I got out of the car as I did when I started. It was unbelievable. It was like I could not get tired. And so I was so excited about this that I began to do every bit of research that was available to do. And I ended up practically living at the University of Arizona Medical Library, reading everything I could on the intestines and every possible study that had anything to do with what we put into our system and what it does and such. And I probably did more research on that than anybody. And I read every book that was ever written about the plaque that came out of the intestines. And so that's how I got started.